All right. Hi, and welcome to the Athlete to Alumni webinar. This series will cover all things related to transitioning from the student athlete to the alumni role and teach you what you can do to help guide this transition before you even graduate. Each week we'll cover a specific career industry to connect you with alumni who have had successful transitions themselves and allow them to give you advice on what you will need to prepare for. I'm Meghan Boryeskne, and I will be the host for this series. This episode will cover the healthcare industry, and joining me today for the discussion are two former women basketball alumni, Kristen Confroy and Malina Howard. I'm super excited to jump into this episode, but first let me give a little background on Kristen and Malina. So Kristen moved 7 times, but went to high school in Solon, Ohio, outside of Cleveland. At Maryland, she majored in neurobiology and physiology while playing women's basketball. After graduating in 2018, she began attending Wake Forest School of Medicine in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Upon graduation, she is considering a career in orthopedic surgery or primary care sports medicine. And Malina, originally from Twinsburg, Ohio, joined the women's basketball team from 2012 to 16. Following her time with the Terp, she continued on as the Big Ten Fellow, working with the academic department to run the Life Skills Development Program for the student athletes. In 2018, she began her time at the University of Maryland School of Medicine, where she serves as the president for the class of 2022. She's currently in her 3rd year completing clinical rotations and will next begin the process of applying to residency programs. So Kristen and Malina, welcome. We're so excited to have you. Thank you for being here.
For having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Of course. So we're going to jump right into the first segment here. With a little bit more about what your story is. So we know each athlete's transition out of college and into their life after sports is very different. So what has life after sports been like for you guys?
Yeah, I guess I can go first. So like you mentioned, I graduated and I kind of knew I wanted to go to med school, but wasn't prepared yet for it. I had some more classes I had to take. I had to take the MCAT. And then I got lucky enough that I was involved in SAC as a student athlete and got to work with Sue a lot. And so I applied for the Big Ten Fellow and was in that position for a year and a half. And really just like learned more about leadership and the ins and outs of the athletic department that I didn't really know about, and working with academics, and just the things I realized I was passionate about. It was like one of the biggest blessings in my life to have that experience, because it's something that now in medical school, I'm still super interested in that aspect of development of people in general. And then 6 months before med school started, I kind of took a break from the job and just got to go live with my boyfriend for a little bit and just take a break before starting med school, and then started med school. And here we've been for almost, I can't believe it's been almost 3 years that I'm almost starting 4th year. It's kind of crazy. Time has really flown by, but definitely was a transitioning. It was hard to transition a little bit, but then wasn't as bad because I got to be around the athletes for a little bit longer.
Awesome, thank you.
And for me, unlike Malina, I did not have any real life experience between Maryland and going to med school. I decided to just really got to rip off the Band-Aid and just go for it. So went right from Maryland women's basketball into what I like in a similar time commitment in medical school. I had about a month between the two and jumped right in. I would say the biggest transition point for me being those transitions being so close together was all of the resources that we have at Maryland, just the people. If you need something, you know who to ask. And if you don't know who to ask, you ask somebody and they'll figure it out for you. And when you step out of that setting, it's on you to figure it out. If someone doesn't know, they usually are just like, I don't know, figure it out. So knowing how to manage the people around you and the situation around you, knowing who to talk to get advice when you need it, is a little bit less regimented, I would say, after Maryland. And that's credit to Maryland. I think they do everything they can to make our lives easier as athletes. And I don't think that, I don't want to speak for Malina, but I don't think I would have been able to do Maryland and prepare for med school without the resources that we were given. But as soon as you leave those doors, those resources some of them are still there, but not all of them. And so there's definitely a learning curve there.
Sure, thank you. So you both kind of touched on a little bit about that, the transition wasn't the easiest thing to do, but what was the biggest challenge for each of you that you faced after Maryland, and how did you kind of overcome it?
I guess one thing for me was just like going from being with these people, your teammates every day, all the time with the same exact goal, similar mindsets, like we were there to have practice, have fun, love each other, play games, to then just kind of be thrown into finding a new team, pretty much like finding your new people. I think that was something that I kind of struggled with. Like I mentioned, I was lucky because I was still working at Maryland and still close with a lot of the girls on the team, but that was like another added factor, was making that distinction between them being my friends and then me also now working in the athletic department being their mentor. So it was like a weird balance. But I think one thing that helped a lot was as soon as I took the job, there was people like Libby Ellis, who was our Dobo, even like Colleen, who like kind of took me under their wing and helped me to like meet more people on the staff to help me find a team of people. And like Sue was always like the best, like in helping me with the transition. So that made it a little bit easier, but definitely just like going from having your team of people to kind of figuring out who you're going to be connected with outside of that sports arena.
I would definitely echo that. I think similar now to you find those people in your corner, and your teammates are obviously there. They're built in. You were recruited with them. You recruited them. When you step out of Maryland athletics, you get to choose those people around you. And the old saying goes, you become the people you surround yourself with. So that's a big responsibility of making sure that you're engaging with people with the right motivation and that you're investing in them just as much as they're investing in you. And that's very similar to your teammates, but outside of the formal team relationship, you have to find those people, and your coaches, I don't know what all different sports have as their resources, but you always have those mentors, again, kind of built into your life. And when you step out of Maryland athletics, it's your role to find those mentors. You need those people to guide you that are going to be in your corner for every step of the way.
So I know that, Malina, you stayed a little bit closer, even, right out of college, and then also obviously still being at Maryland for med school. But Kristen, can you talk a little bit about like taking more of a larger move? Obviously you're in North Carolina now, like just the social transition, that piece, you're still with classmates and, you still have that school setting within you, but how is that to kind of be in a completely new place and have to start like almost fresh of, just how to be social? I know as athletes, sometimes you like you're saying, you have those built-in friends. So like, how is it to kind of completely start a new social network?
Yeah, so as you mentioned in my bio, I moved a lot as a kid. So I feel like that's something I had to learn the hard way, always being the new kid at the lunch table. But in med school, it was really interesting coming in. My school does this thing called Launch, which is 2 weeks of, they call it personal and professional development, but it's really just a chance to meet people before you get thrown into the deep end of learning medicine. And it was very interesting how quickly former athletes gravitated towards each other, just because of, you don't have a ton of free time. So you're going to find people that like to do the things that you like to do. And as athletes, we like to be active. So that's where I found a lot of my friends. We started a flag football team that literally was all former Division I athletes. And we just raked the floor with the undergrad kids, and it was super fun. But I feel like it's you gravitate towards people that are wired similarly. And a lot of times it's athletes. It could be other people too. In my case, it was just athletes, but I think being open to trying new things, but also staying grounded in what you like to do and who you are. And those people often sort of fall into your life, I think.
Awesome, thank you. So another thing that I think a lot of athletes struggle with after college, and the two of you are, like we're saying, still in somewhat of a regimented schedule, but the whole time management piece, obviously when you're an athlete, you're super strict on time and they kind of give you your schedule and you just follow it. So how did you both handle owning your own schedule and kind of making that adjustment to, having to choose what you want to do with the little bit of free time that you do have? Did you continue to keep a exercise regimen? What was that like for you all to kind of manage your own calendar?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, well, for med school specifically, once I started, I kind of just took on the schedule of what it was like. We had like lectures in the morning from 8 to 12. So that was like when I had class as an athlete. So I kind of was like, all right, I'll be in class at that time. Then from 12 to 5, I would go to the library and study. And I treated that as if it was my practice block, because we would like eat lunch, then have practice from like 1 to 3 or 4 as an athlete. So I kind of just kept that, and that being a little bit more regimented and going back to being like a college athlete and keeping that time schedule really helped me a lot. And I kind of, like Kristen was saying, I got in a flow of things with people who had a similar mindset and had similar schedules. So it made it a lot easier. I lived with 3 other med students. So we kept the same schedule. We would go to lecture, then go to the library together, and then go home together and have dinner. And if we wanted to study some more, maybe study. I think what was the hardest part with like actually getting into medical school in the first year was like finding time and like when I was going to do the other things I liked. Because you feel like you have to, it's like your full-time job to study and to learn all of these things to be able to be a physician. And so there was like a lot of remorse if I wasn't using whatever time I had to try to learn the materials. So it did take a few months for me to like get into a routine of like incorporating, I was going to work out every day at like 5:30 because I'm not the best me if I'm not working out. And I was gonna, on my walks home, try to call my mom or call my dad or catch up with other people. And then spending more time on the weekends, I would do as much work as possible during the week so that during the weekends I had time off and didn't have to focus as much on the schoolwork unless there was like a test coming up. Those weekends was just studying, similar to like finals when you study right before a final. So it kind of, with having the 2 years out, I kind of went back to my basketball schedule as a med student. So I think it helped me a lot having the college athlete experience to manage my time that way.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the athletics to med school is a very similar time management schedule, as Malina sort of laid out already. I would say the biggest thing for me was learning when to not study. As she mentioned, like our full-time job is to learn and to do well on our tests. And it's very easy to get wrapped up in that our identity is in that test and our test grade. Similar to how it was as an athlete, like our identity could easily get wrapped up in our sport. And so finding those pockets of time that keep us full, because we can't be at our best without finding that time. So I would liken it to like, for us studying, we had to find time to work out because again, we're not at our best, we're not working out. And then we had to find time to just like be a regular human. You could easily fill your entire day with studying and just feel so empty, but knowing when to stop and knowing when we need to do something else. And I would liken that too as an athlete, you can train and train and train and train, but you have to know when to rest. And without rest, you're not going to be able to train at your best. So I would say there's a lot of parallels to what we did as athletes, which is probably a little bit different than a transition to the actual real world, if I had to guess. But I don't know what that would be like.
Well, hopefully soon you will know.
Like 2 years out before starting school. That transition, I mean, it was like you work your 8 to 5 schedule. Like I had an 8 to 5 schedule of being at work and then not having work to do. I like did struggle a little bit with the free time, like not knowing what to do with myself from like 5 to 10 o'clock at night when I went to bed. Like that was definitely a little weird. Like I was lucky I lived with other people and we would like watch TV and I made friendships, but I definitely struggled a little bit with that because there was like no studying to do. There was like, you didn't have to worry about being in bed at exactly like 10 o'clock because you're going to have practice the next morning. So I will say that was like having more free time at first. It was a little awkward. It took me a few months to like get used to like, oh, like I can go home and sit on my couch for a little, watch a TV show, cook dinner, like do whatever I wanted to do. But I think in the long run, it helped me to figure out in those 2 years what things did matter to me and what made me feel best. And that's like the working out and the cooking. I realized coming into med school, I had to do that to kind of be my best self, like I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and I like what you said too, even about like kind of keeping it to a similar structure as your basketball schedule. So, I mean, you could do that in a 9 to 5, you could do that into the schedule. You aren't just keeping those blocks of times where this is the time I'm gonna do this and so on. I think that could be really helpful for anyone, really. So we touched on some of the challenges and more of the struggle side, but you know, what's one postgraduate accomplishment that you made that like you're really proud of? I mean, obviously getting into med school is a pretty good accomplishment, but anything else?
You stole my answer because I feel like that's literally all that's exciting that's happened, because since getting into med school, my life has just been studying. Nothing exciting happens.
This is something recent that happened. There's this thing called Gold Humanism Honor Society in med school. And it's kind of just like at Maryland, at least your classmates vote on people. You get to pick 5 people in your class that you would vote on that you think represent like humanistic medicine. And I recently got inducted into that. And so that was pretty cool to be voted on by my classmates as like someone that they would want to take care of their family members. So I think that that's pretty cool. And it just reminded me that like being me and who I am, and it's not like Kristen said, you can get sucked into this identity of like what your test scores are, how you're studying, how you're performing in school. But like you gotta, to be a physician, to be in the medical field, to really be anything in life, like you gotta be a good person and be able to communicate with people and connect with people and care about people and serve others. So that was a pretty cool accomplishment. I would say that just happened recently.
That's awesome. Congratulations. All right, so we're going to switch into segment 2, which shifts the focus a little bit more from like your personal story to sort of the current student athlete stories and what you think would be the best advice that you could give them. So Maryland Made was not really an established like entity while you two were here, but how did you get ready for your career while being a student athlete? Did you utilize any university connections, like faculty, the career center? What helped you be successful outside of really the athletic department?
I think the big one for med school in particular was the health professions advising office. They like everything of my last 2 years at Maryland kind of ran through them, with getting shadowing experience and just all of the things that go into applying for medical school. They were huge. I think our academic advisors are huge. Our schedules are chaotic, and getting the labs you need in either during practice and all of those scheduling things, they worked out all the details. I really liked our team had, we did like, it was for sports psychology, like performance sort of deal, but I feel like it translates very well into life outside of athletics as well. So that was a big one that I still lean on today, I would say.
I agree. I think also like just being connected with people, because you never know what connections people might have. So like getting to know the people in the academic department and the like support staff, because they might have connections to other places that you don't know that could be helpful to applying to medical school or wherever you're thinking in the health professional world. Also like connecting with some of the donors. I think that that's super like critical and helpful, because they have connections that you don't know about at all, like in the real world, that maybe they know someone that works at another institution that you could have like an informational interview with and learn more about different healthcare fields or whatever you're going into in life. So I think that's really important, just like trying to find connections earlier rather than later, even if it's like a 15-minute informational interview to learn about something you're interested in. Because I know it feels like your time is like so busy, but like you have to make time for what's important to you. And I think everyone, like life after your time at Maryland is important. And so preparing yourself as best you can by making those connections, and also everything Kristen said, agree. We have a great support staff that helps with all of the things.
I like the idea of connecting with donors. So how did you how were you successful in that, and what advice could you give specifically to like, finding a donor to talk to, or, building that relationship with?
Yeah, I mean, I know for me, like there's always like the donor events at the beginning of the basketball season that we had. And so just being engaging at those and introducing and talking to those donors and getting to know them, because so much of the time it's about us and their love for us and them being our fans, but like what they do is awesome. They give back to us to be able to have this education. So getting to know them and what they do, and then you not using, but like understanding what they do and understanding what connections they have. And then also just asking your coaches, like saying like, I'm interested in this. Do you know any donors, or do you know if anybody else, any other coaching staff or people know donors that have connections in this field? It's something easy you can do and is super helpful.
I completely agree with that. And I have a personal anecdotal story that's kind of hilarious in that regard. I can't remember the name of the program where like individuals could sponsor an athlete and pay for their scholarship, but we would have those dinners. And I remember I'd never met him before. It was my sophomore year, and I was sat at a table, and I had one guy on my right and one guy on my left, and I assumed one of them was the guy I was supposed to meet, but I didn't know which one it was. And one guy kept talking to me, so I was like, okay, it's probably him. So I engaged with him most of the night. It turns out it was the other guy, but the other individual that I was speaking to for most of the night, like, operates a private practice sports medicine firm that I ended up shadowing at and coming back to and doing research with. So just talking to people and engaging with people and asking about their life, like Malina said, so much of the events are circled around us, and so many people support us, which is awesome. But don't forget to turn the table and to talk about them and ask about them and what's going on in their life.
Yeah, and similarly, I have a funny story actually, like connecting to other coaches. Missy from field hockey actually connected me. I was helping a little bit with the recruit who was interested in medicine, and she was introducing and talking to one of the deans of admissions at the University of Maryland School of Medicine, and got me connected with them through that too, because I talked to the recruit and then ended up talking to both. And then on my interview day at Maryland for med school, he like remembered talking to me, and like I honestly still think to this day part of that connection is why I got accepted. Not why I got accepted, obviously the application process has its things, but having connections is super helpful.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Thank you both. So we have a lot of student athletes who are interested in pursuing a career in the healthcare field. So I know you both touched on it a little bit, but what specific advice could you give to those students?
I would say get involved early with the Health Professions Advising Office. There were a lot of things I didn't even know existed that had to happen to apply to med school. And thankful that I had reached out early enough to be able to sneak everything in, but there are just a lot of hurdles to jump over, and that is literally their job, is to help teach you through it and to work you through it. And I would just say they are some of those people that are very well connected in the medical field. Again, it was through them that I got a lot of my shadowing hours, by connecting me with someone who is very plugged into Maryland and a big Terps fan. So that's another thing, is like our being Maryland athletes is very appealing to a lot of people. So being able to work that angle as well, that, oh, this so-and-so is a Maryland athlete, they're going to work hard, they're going to do well, I'm going to bring them into my practice to do this for me. So don't forget that too.
Similar, I wish I would have connected earlier to the pre-health advising office. Like I think I didn't until my junior year meet for the first time, or like even bring up anything. And so I mean, it ended up being fine because I'm really glad I took time off. But like Kristen said, there are some things you have to have done prior to like applying to med school. Like for med school specifically, there's a thing called the pre-health packet that you have to complete by a certain deadline for them to be able to write you your letter of recommendation that they write you. So just things like that, and going on that website, even if you haven't, like that's a good first step, because they have a lot of things outlined on there. And then they're just great people to talk to about things, and they can connect you with other students who are considering different healthcare fields, because there are multitude different fields in healthcare, like PA school, PT school, med school. And I know I struggled between PT school, PA school, and med school. And so just connecting with those people who maybe had similar, didn't know which one they wanted to apply to or go into, they might have connections to those people that you could just sit down and talk with as well.
I will echo that their website has a ton of information. It can be kind of overwhelming. And also there's a lot of numbers, and I think people drawn to medicine are very like data driven, and it can be terrifying to look at those numbers. So I would encourage you to meet with somebody, because being an athlete makes a big difference. Like, I don't even remember the crazy numbers of hours you're supposed to have shadowing or doing community service. And it's like, there's not enough hours in the day for us to do that. So what's a reasonable goal for me to do that will be supplemented by the fact that I was a Division I athlete? So keep that in mind as well.
So Malina, you mentioned this a little bit, but with like, you know, networking with your peer group. So a lot of the student athletes on this call, and a lot of the student athletes who are interested in pursuing a career in the healthcare field, actually created a like community-based group called the Pre-Health Terps, where they get together and, you know, network with each other and just kind of talk about the nuances of, you know, getting into the healthcare field. So what advice would you give those students on networking and building clinical opportunities?
Yeah, that's awesome. It makes me so excited to hear that that happened, because I remember when I was working there, that was one thing, like I wanted to start a pre-med, pre-health group for all the people, because it is a little
We
daunting.
tried to.
Yeah, it was like Darby helped us a little bit, but I think it's awesome to connect with other people who are going through the same experience, one as like students in general, because it can feel overwhelming to be in these hard classes and like feel like you're like just, I know I was blessed to have two other teammates who were interested in pre-med and in the same classes as me. I mean, going through the same process. But in terms of like connections to like clinical experiences and other people in the healthcare field, one, helping each other. So if one person makes a connection, bringing that up to your friends is helpful. Like I know there was multiple times that I made a connection. I'd be like, oh, I met this person. Are you interested in talking to them as well? They like talking to med students. And then like Kristen mentioned, the pre-health office has like this whole database of alumni who are in the healthcare field in specific fields, that if you meet with them and tell them what you're interested even in like specialties, they can connect you with those people. And just being proactive. Like it's gonna feel weird if you're gonna email somebody and they don't email back, but like do it again in 2 weeks, because they often are, especially in medicine, super busy, don't check their emails sometimes. And you just kind of have to be persistent. Like any sort of mentor relationship, it goes both ways, and sometimes the mentee has to be extremely persistent in reaching out to that person to get them to connect with them. I don't know if you have anything else, Kristen.
I second all of that. I don't want to belabor the point. The only thing I would add is don't be offended when people don't respond to your emails or take literally weeks to respond. That's something I still struggle with, but just know it's not personal.
That's definitely good advice. I think that could apply to any industry, because I think a lot of people think that way. All right, so we're going to roll into our last segment here. Like I said, I want to leave time for the students to be able to ask questions, but the last point that I want to make is just staying connected. So how can student athletes stay connected to UMD after graduation, and how have you both done that? I mean, obviously you're here, so you're connected enough to know, and for me to know you to be able to do this, but what do you recommend for students to kind of stay involved in UMD after leaving?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, I worked there. So that's one thing you can always do is work and hang out. But I would say as an athlete, get to know, like I said before, get to know everybody, not just your teammates, not just your coaches, but take the time to like say hi to the other coaches or the other support staff in the hallway and get to know them, because those are people you can make connections with that are going to keep you coming back to Maryland. And then just staying attuned. Like I follow all of the Maryland things on social media and trying to stay up to date with what's going on and the competitions, but then also like the academic department, all the things they're posting, and like being involved and connected in that way. I think it's super important too to give back to the university that gave so much to you. So that's one thing I've always kind of said, like anybody can reach out to me about, one, for sure, applying to medical school and the medical school process, but do anything in life. Like I would love to mentor anybody who is an athlete there, because I got mentored by so many great other athletes. So just having that mindset of giving back to the place that gave to you, and kind of leaving that place while you're there right now, leaving it better than you found it, and making a lasting impact, which it sounds like you guys are all doing with all these pre-health. It makes me so happy, the pre-health club. But then when you leave, checking in and making sure that the people who come after you are doing that too.
Yeah, Malina dropping gold nuggets over here. But I think a big thing that for me, being farther away, I mean, obviously with COVID, nobody can, but being able to go to games and follow along is a little bit more challenging. But something I try to do is similar to what Malina said, like when going on walks or driving somewhere, to call somebody. And for just last week, like our coach won Coach of the Year. So I called her and talked to her for a while, and keeping in touch with people on social media, and just remembering that relationships go both ways. So you can't always be like, oh, well, they didn't reach out to me. Like you can do that. And that's a good way to stay invested in people and stay in touch. Because without that, it is hard to have those mentoring relationships, which I think is something that we all like to do. Having been through it and kind of conquered and moved on, we want to pass along what we learned to those trying to do the same thing.
Kind of led me right into my last question here. So Malina, I know that you have, like you said, benefited from mentor relationships, but can you talk a little bit more about like your relationship with Darby, explaining how that kind of panned out and how that's worked for the both of you being in med school at the same time?
Yeah, I remember when I was, as the Big Ten fellow, we started like a mentoring program. And Darby was someone I matched with our trainer on the basketball team. And so then she was coming around all the time to practice, and I just kind of stayed connected and talked with her and became friends. And then as I was in medical school, she would text me and ask me questions about different things, and like through her interview process, kind of things to say in interviews, where she should interview. And then she got into the University of Maryland, and it was like, I was like not trying to pressure her to come to Maryland. And I was like, you have to go wherever you feel like, but was so excited when she decided to come to the University of Maryland. And then with COVID, it has been a little bit like weird. Obviously, we're not seeing each other. Their class is more virtual because the first year and a half is online and just learning like classwork things. And we're like actually in the hospital right now. So I haven't seen her as much as I would like to face to face. But I've gotten to talk to her a lot. And then she I think it's like after the first 3 months, you like vote on student government. And she asked me like, should I run for class president? And as our class president, I was like, of course you should run for class president. It's the greatest position. You get to know everybody in the class. You get to make connections with our like Office of Medical Education, Office of Student Affairs. The things that I loved most about my job at Maryland was like being in that sort of role. I get to make connections with the people at our school who do that. So I encouraged her to apply for president, and then she got it. And so now it's just like been great to like, she'll ask me questions about the things as first year class president that you do that I'm like, wow, I can't believe it's been 2 years and I was doing that just 2 years ago. So it's been pretty cool. And people I've messaged other some of our mentors and our like advisors, like, oh, Darby, isn't she the best? And like they all know her. And so it's just cool to see her making her little mark at our university and really making change for the better, because she's part of a new curriculum. And so just giving awesome feedback to keep making our University of Maryland School of Medicine better. Sorry, that was too much.
No, that was fine. Thank you. All right, so before we get into the questions, just want to give you the opportunity to say any final words on one last sort of piece of advice or that you wish you knew or would like the students here to know.
I think for me, especially if you are interested, I'm assuming everyone here is interested in pursuing a career in healthcare, there's going to be a lot of haters that say, oh, you can't do that. It's too hard. It's not going to happen. Don't let them discourage you. I think if anything, let it fuel you to prove them wrong, that we have all the resources we could ever need to make it happen. It by no means will be an easy task, and there are certainly easier roads, but you can do it. And don't hesitate to reach out to whoever. I don't know anybody on this call, but I'm still happy to connect with you. And it's a little bit harder, again, being far away and not knowing as many people, because we're getting old, Malina. Can you believe that? I barely know people in Maryland anymore. But we want to see you succeed, and we want to see you chase your dreams. And if that's healthcare, awesome, all for it. And if not, that's okay too. If you have another career interest in mind that is competitive and difficult, would love to help you walk through that.
Yeah, echoing what Kristen said. And then also, once you get to where you're going, being okay with I think that's one thing that I struggled with a little bit the first 2 years of medical school, was the feeling of not doing exactly what I thought medicine was going to be like. I think I had this expectation of what med school was going to be like, and then was really disappointed by it. I felt like I wasn't being helpful. I was just studying 24/7. And so I really struggled a little bit mentally with that aspect. And it took me a while to open up to people and have conversations. But then you realize other people are going through that as well. So it's easier said than done, but being comfortable with talking about the things you're struggling with, because like Kristen said, it's definitely worth it, but it's a hard road working in healthcare, not only the things you see every day and the things you go through working in the healthcare field, but just the mental struggle of getting to that end point. So being comfortable talking and opening up to people about the things you're struggling with.
I have another thing too, sorry. We sort of both alluded to it, but don't let yourself get wrapped up in your identity of whatever thing you're doing at that time. If it's your sport right now, you're more than your sport, you're more than your stat line. If you do pursue medical school, you are more than your test grades, you are more than your class ranking. And latch on to that and remember who you are, and that's going to make you better at whatever you do. statistics are not always the end goal. How are you impacting people's lives? Just different things. Remember that you are more than your score, you are more than your stat line.
No one's going to say, oh, that Kristen Confroy, she got a 98 on that test. But they're going to say she was someone who sat down and talked to me and listened to what I had to say and was a great human. So just remembering those little things.
Well, that was quite the mic drop. I think that was great advice, and kind of circled back to the whole purpose of why we're doing these, this whole series, and making sure that athletes are not only aware of that, but prepared for their next step so that they don't struggle with that piece afterwards. So thank you both for being here. I know that we still have a few students on the call, so want to give you guys the opportunity to ask any questions or just talk to Malina or Kristen. So if you want to, you can feel free to unmute yourself.
For those who are on, do you guys have any, like, what sort of healthcare fields are you guys interested in? Tell us a little bit about you.
I do have a question.
Yeah, okay.
Like, I don't know if you guys know already, like what type of doctor or whatever you want to be after you're done with med school, but I know that I want to be a doctor, but I don't know like what direction. So how are you guys kind of like figuring that out, or like getting that feeling to actually like know what you want to do?
Yeah, well, I'm honestly, it's been a week. This is like the first time, third year, like you get the chance to rotate around and all the different things. And so for a while, I was like, oh, I thought I wanted to be a pediatrician. I'm like, came into med school, like I'm doing peds, like I know it. And then I did my first rotation and I did OBGYN and I loved it. And I was like, wow, that's the coolest thing in the world. And was going to be an OBGYN until like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when I started family medicine. And now I'm loving family medicine. So it definitely for me has been a little bit like I am still in the process of figuring that out. But what in the last month I've done to try to help myself not be stressed by that, because it is stressful to like feel like I have to pick and apply to this residency program and then that's the rest of my life. But one, talking to people in the fields that I am the most interested in. So I've been scheduling meetings, whether they're 15 minutes or an hour or whatever much time I have. I've just been talking to people who are in those fields and kind of the residents, what their life looks like as a resident, but then also what the attendings, so the people who once they finish residency, what their life looks like, because that's like the real. Residency is like 3 to 4 to 5 years, depending on what you go into. But then after that, that's what like real life looks like. And then two, knowing that like you just kind of have to, I got told this advice was for at least picking a field in medicine. It's gonna feel like you found your soulmate. Like this is what hurt. I don't know if it's for everybody, but for me, she was like, you might not ever feel like you found your soulmate. Like this is 100% what you want to do. You kind of just have to go with a gut instinct if you're deciding between one or two things, and go with it and know that people change too. Like people switch, they start a residency and then they switch what they're into because they realize they like something else. So that's a long-winded way for me to say I'm still struggling with that a little bit, but just making connections to figure it out.
And I would say a lot of people come in like wanting to have an answer and wanting to know right away, and most people don't. And now both of us, like rounding the corner of third year, Wake's a little bit different. So I'm actually a fourth year now, which is wild to me. But there are people now that still don't know what they want to do, and that's okay. And that some people come in day one, this is what I'm doing, and they stay on that track, but that is not what's common. Advice similar to what Malina was given, which I think is really good, because a lot of times we idealize what this process looks like of, oh, it's magical, I'm going to be a neurosurgeon, I know in my bones. When the reality is there's going to be things that you like about some things and things you don't like about it. And advice that was given to me is almost have like your foundational pieces, like what really matters to you. Is it work-life balance? Is it salary? Is it patient relationship? Is it surgery? Whatever your foundational pieces are, those need to be your priorities. And then figure out what can you live without, what can't you live with. And then you just have to take all of those different factors and make a decision. And none of them are going to be perfect. And that's really hard to swallow. But that's the reality, is there's going to be, I'm torn between orthopedic surgery and primary care sports med, which are entirely different. And my foundational pieces fit into both. And I don't know what I'm going to do at this point still. And we apply to residency in what, like 7 months? Too soon. So it's okay to not know is the point of that, and it'll take time to figure out.
Advice that I got too was,
Thank you.
like, knowing the people, like having the people around you, especially once you start rotations. I don't know if you got this advice ever, Kristen, but like keep track of like how you are as a person. Like when are you your most best self and you're normal and you're happiest, and coming home every day like, wow, today was awesome, or like wanting to wake up the next morning and going and not being like, I have to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to be in, but being excited about it. So that was one piece that's been kind of helpful in me, and like then using that from other people to self-reflect on like, oh, I guess I was happier when I was on this rotation versus this rotation.
Thank you. I do have another question too. So I'm a junior right now, so I still have some classes to pick, and I wanted to ask you guys what you thought was just so helpful, what you did for like courses at UMD and like really like came back in med school.
Mammalian physiology with Dr. Opoku. Must take.
Okay.
I wish I would have taken that one. I'll say, I mean, I was a kines major and I took anatomy and physiology 1 and 2. And I think that those were super helpful going into med school. I think my anatomy course was extremely hard, but was a little bit easier with having a foundational anatomy background.
I would agree. You should do that. I didn't, and I regret it.
Yeah, I did do that already. That's good to know.
I would say those were helpful courses.
Okay, thank you.
Literally anything with Dr. Opoku. I also took endocrinology with her. It was money as well for med school.
Okay, I'm gonna write that professor down.
Oh yeah, she's great. I don't know if you haven't heard that. She's awesome. She's a great lady.
Any final questions for them before we wrap up?
I actually have one. I was wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about what your application process looked like.
Well, for me, so you have to go through the student health and do the pre-health packet, which kind of asks a bunch of questions and sets you up for the application process. And they have you do a draft of your personal statement, and then they give you feedback on that. So that's one part of the application process. And then throughout that, like they do a mock interview as well, where they'll actually have, whether it's, I think Kristen did it with a student, I did it with a staff member, and they do like a fake med school interview with you. And then the other parts, so you'll have to I don't remember the exact deadlines or dates, but you have to submit like your primary application by a certain date.
I think it's in January.
The primary for like med school.
Oh, okay. No, I thought you meant the committee letter.
Oh, the committee letter one, I think you're right, that is January. But then primaries for med school, I think, are in June or July, and you submit those, and then you'll wait a few months, and then they'll send you secondary. All the schools you applied to will send you secondary letters back if they want you to send in different, like you'll have to answer more specific questions to those schools, and then you'll submit those and then get asked on interviews. And like, I think August to January interviews can happen. Other things like throughout that time, I think one thing I wish I would have thought about was like the price of applying to med school, because the primary application is pretty expensive for I think it's I don't know if it's changed at all, but it was a solid, I think 300 and something for 3 primary applications, and then an added $25 for every other school you wanted to apply to. And I applied to 15 schools. And then the secondary applications are also anywhere between $35 to $100 for the secondary applications for schools. So that's just one thing to keep in the back of your mind. And schools' websites will have that. I don't know if that really answers your question all the way. I'm trying to think of other things I wish I would have.
I actually recently texted this to someone, so I have the full timeline if you guys want to hear it. So one thing I will say before I spew this out is med school admission processes is rolling admissions. So everything opens in June, but technically they're open until the fall, but they say you want to try to get everything submitted as soon as possible. So with that being said, this timeline starts in December. That's when I started working on my committee letter that we talked about through the advising office. And then that needs to be submitted in January. January through May, I did MCAT prep. I took the MCAT in May. And then in June, I started working on my primary applications, but waited to submit it till I got my MCAT score back, which takes about a month. And then about a month after you submit your primaries, you'll get your secondaries. And you want to turn those around within like 2 weeks is usually the window. But again, as soon as possible, you want to get those back to schools. And then starting August to anywhere up to like January will be interviews. I did, because all of my stuff was submitted pretty early. I think you too, Malina, our interviews were earlier in the fall rather than into January. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you, guys.
I have one question. Just during the process of everything, how did you guys like stay stress-free and just stay organized throughout everything?
Didn't stay stress-free.
One thing that helped was like having somebody else going through it at the same time. So Chris and I applied in the same cycle. So that was kind of very helpful, was like knowing someone else was applying, and any questions. Kristen was way more organized than I was. So any questions I had, I often went to Kristen like, when do we have to do this? I'm a little bit more all over the place, I feel like. I don't know. But I will say, like, meeting with the pre-health office and coming up with a plan, finding someone in that office who is like you feel comfortable with, that you can email at any time, or like often, like sometimes I would text them and like just with questions right away that you're thinking about. Having that connection made me feel a little bit more stress-free, knowing that I had someone in my corner. And then just reminding yourself that, like, again, you're not defined by like getting into med school. People want to apply multiple times. And two, like just trusting that all the things you've put in and all the work you've put in is enough, and you're going to get in where you're supposed to get in and end up at the school you're supposed to end up, and end up in the field that you're supposed to get up. I think I just had to continually remind myself that, because it's hard not to think like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get into med school, and like stress until the day comes where you're accepted into one. But just trying to continually remind yourself of that. I don't know, Kristen, anything?
I don't underestimate how much schools like Division I athletes, because of the discipline you have to get through it, the commitment to whatever the task is. But to answer your question, Nadia, I think for me, it was one meeting with the health professions office. I will give a plug for Wendy, because that's who we both use, and she's very good with athletes and just an awesome person. She came to my senior night. She's just awesome. She was really helpful in having a timeline, and then I'm very much a checklist person. So how I just rambled off those things, I literally had a checklist that I would check the boxes when I was done, because that's therapeutic for me.
I went to Kristen for everything, because I was like, oh, I know I'm missing something, because I did not have a list.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, we'll wrap up for tonight. So again, Malina and Kristen, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to everyone who came and listened. I'm sure we'll have a bunch of people watching online on our YouTube channel as well. Malina just put her number in the chat, and I was just going to suggest anyway that we tag them on their social medias on our social media page. So if you do want to reach out with questions or connect with either of them, I mean, a good Google search would probably get you either of their LinkedIns as well. So thank you everyone for coming. And with that, we'll close out tonight.
Good luck, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you.
guys.